Hi, and welcome to Open Door Veterinary Collective's Lunch and Learn series. Quick drop-ins where we explore practical solutions that organizations are using to address barriers to accessing pet care and resources in their communities. I'm Aimee StArnaud with Open Door Veterinary Collective, and I'm excited to introduce Dr. Janet Hoy-Gerlach, who's the Director of Veterinary Social Work with me at Open Door. So she's got a lot of good stuff to get into, so we're just going to let her take it away.
What we're going to be looking at today, positive, if you'll forgive the cheesy little play on words there, peer support and also community care and ultimately the idea that we can help each other in this kind of hard, on the daily work that you all are doing in a way that doesn't burden yourselves more. And I want to start, this is kind of, maybe jumping back from that a bit, but we're going to connect this with something a bit different and hopefully uplifting. And that is simply, what's your why? And certainly it's not anything, I'm not going to put a poll up and ask you to share it or anything like that, but each person in that's here on this Zoom webcast together has a why you do the work, whether you're a newbie and not sure exactly how all this unfolds, or you've been doing it for decades and you're hanging in there. Somewhere in there is a reason or reasons that connect to some of, my guess is, your most deeply held values. What's important to you, what's meaningful to you. And typically in animal welfare, protection and veterinary work, those tend to connect to animals, non-human animals, and our regard for them in some way. And so that then can become a shared why in many instances. So just taking a moment to foreground that, and we'll kind of put a pause on that, move into some other things, and then bring this back. I want to start by just going over, we have a half hour, not even, because I want to have time for your questions. But coming out of this, my hope is that you're going to recognize the difference between healthy peer support, so peer support that doesn't feel burdensome when you're offering it to somebody or feel like you're dumping when you're seeking it so much. The difference between that and what is called trauma dumping. And that is typically not on purpose. It happens because we are stressed and we are overwhelmed. And my guess is almost all of us have done it. I have certainly trauma dumped, and not, with any intention to do so. And, we're human, but recognizing differences and having strategies to work with it a bit differently is what we're all about today, which takes us to the second, which is using what's called low impact. Low impact in terms of how it affects the people around us. It's not vicariously sort of inflicting the sensory aspects of whatever it is that you're sharing that was traumatic. Kind of, you ask about a movie, or I don't know, maybe you don't. I do. Like, does the dog die? And the person's like, yes, the dog dies. I'm like, okay, that's it. That's all I want to know. And then they go into a bunch of detail. I'm like, I don't need to know all the horrible thing. That I'm going to skip that movie. Thanks. So yeah. So high impact for the very detailed debriefs are not what we're talking about. We're talking about enough to get the idea across, communicate, but without getting that other person's multi-sensory experiencing of what was traumatic happening. And also anchoring those with our whys, our values, to kind of help us keep anchored, connected, rather than being kind of knocked over by all of the difficulties, the pain that can come with this work. Listening with care while protecting your own capacity. There is a quote, I can't remember whose it is, I saved it on my phone when I first saw it, and I've shared it with colleagues, interns. I look at it regularly. It's something to the effect of, you do not have to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. That is not what any of us are called for, and it's not sustainable. If the mission is your why, that does not get very far if you're on fire keeping other people warm. We burn out that way. The ability to set compassionate boundaries. Sometimes boundaries, especially for those of us maybe who are more in the people pleaser lane innately, and we certainly can learn to operate otherwise. I have and do. But boundaries, saying no or I can't, or it can sometimes feel like we're being unkind, unhelpful. Boundaries are actually, here's what I can do and here's what I can't do in this moment. And they are about compassion to us, compassion to the other person, compassion to the community, if you will, that we're a part of. We're all in the same workspace. They give permission to let others do similarly. And finally, pulling this together, this idea of community care, that it's bigger than any one of us could possibly do. And, each of us does what's in front of us, support each other how we can. And together as a community, we're able to uplift this mission of whatever it is, the work that we're doing, to varying degrees in a way that ideally, even in maybe really small ways, but still actions that help promote dignity for animals and their people. And most of the whys come back to that in some way or another. So I want to start. I'm a nerd. I'm a former professor, and science very much backs up and is the foundation for what we're going to be looking at. And maybe the terms across the top aren't particularly familiar: polyvagal, the sympathetic nervous system, dorsal vagus nerve, ventral vagal. Okay, let's move on. What is below those, my guess is very familiar with. If we think of, and you all could teach me a webcast about this, but a reactive dog, they go into fight flight. If it's too much, they may shut down, sort of like a nervous system collapse. When they're calm, when they're below threshold, I think the word you use is, they can engage. They're pack animals. They can engage with other animals to some extent. Their comfort level varies, and of course, then building on that when they're over here. Similarly, us human primates, we're social mammals. And we are hardwired for these. And each of these has helped us to survive and evolve. The connections that we have from the bottom part of our brain, the limbic, that does the fight, flight, and the freeze. We have many more connections going from that down below part up to our thinking brain. So real easy for it to bump the thinking brain offline. The thinking brain is newer. That's to cooperate and collaborate to survive socially. Less one directional connects going down. So it's much easier to go into the first two than to the last if we're experiencing a stressor. But guess which one is typically the most helpful in many modern day stressors? The first two are good if something's trying to eat us or beat us up. The third one is our problem solver, our de-escalator, our let's work together to figure this out. How do we get resources? The thinking brain. So, and it's not all so new. Cooperation is a stress and survival mechanism. These were found starting in 10,000 BC, different images of humans cooperating, collaborating to get tasks done in Southeast Nigeria. So, and many, many more in other parts of the world. So our cooperation, collaboration brain working in community is one of our survival mechanisms. And survival in the kind of work you do can be particularly relevant in terms of the occupational stressors you experience that are high, much higher than average. If we look at what the average stress level is for occupations in the United States, folks who work in animal welfare, many veterinary settings are exposed on a regular basis at a much higher level of high stress, euthanasias, crises, lack of capacity, maybe short staffing, things that bump our bodies into our stress responses. Again, we're hardwired, it's automatic. And I put down a few of these, euthanasia days where, it's on the schedule, we know it's coming. And it may be animals who've been there a long time, who we have relationships with, but maybe would be even dangerous to opt out or released to a rescue. It was a cruelty case, etc. High intake periods or closures, no intake, either of those, and having to figure out how to work with that. Difficult humans, be that a coworker or somebody from the public or on the phone. We don't know what's happening at the other side of that human primate, but what we do know is sometimes it's coming at us hard, fast, in a way that's unfair, and our bodies are hardwired to detect threats. And so negative social encounter, it was a threat for many eras, being separated from the herd, not having the protection of the group. So our body encodes it, we react to it. And then more internally, but often also shared with people who've similarly been involved with the case are the individual cases that stay with you. They maybe even haunt you. You dream, you're having intrusive thoughts. So it's not just what's happening at the shelter, it's what's happening afterward. What are common ways, and this isn't just specific to animal welfare and veterinary. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I mentioned I'm a Geek Informer professor. I also worked for over 2 decades in public mental health. I did crisis work, community outreach, suicide assessment and intervention, lots of high stress. And, when we're in the moment, it's sort of almost instinct. We push through, we take care of business. We don't do anything with it, and it comes home with us. Another variation of this is we may lean on, maybe we have the work person, our work buddy, our work spouse, whichever, that we lean on, but maybe this person is our container, or vice versa. Maybe we are theirs, and too much is subjective. But if you find yourself starting to feel overwhelmed, that's a signal. Listening to our bodies, not what our brain's thinking, like our images or our kind of voiceover thoughts, but like how you feel in your body when you just think about, having that venting conversation that could kind of tell you when you're hitting the too much, because you're gonna feel, your body will feel like it does when you're starting to feel some stress. Of course, there's grief and distress. These are, emotional, painful feelings when we care. Anxiety, kind of the physical reactions that our bodies do for fight, flight, faster heart rate, respiration rate, blood pressure, our stomach, the blood goes away, we may be nauseous, our throats may tighten. Things, again, that might help us run or fight physically, but staying with us after we've left or when we're in the middle of a, complex conversation, they can be tricky. Or we may numb out. And again, all of these are our body's ways of trying to protect us in the moment. They're adaptive, so kind of just blocking the feelings, or even starting to disconnect from the team, the relationships, maybe, the people that you usually take your break with, talk with, check in with, you find yourself not intentionally, but kind of backing off. Something that I still have to remind myself of, especially when I'm in the throes of it, is that our pain is typically not just pointless. It in the kind of work, animal welfare, first responder helping professions, work-related pain typically points us toward what we care deeply about and our values. It's not a personal shortcoming. It's not a weakness. We may be having thoughts of that. I should have done more. Why can't we do better? This isn't fair. And we're working in systems with real limits and deficits that, make those kinds of thoughts completely valid and understandable, and incredibly difficult to carry by ourselves. So if we kind of connect the pain with the values we have, we have grief, it's because that long stay animal, we wanted the best outcome for them and we had a relationship with them. Guilt, what else could I have done? There had to have been something. Anger, this isn't fair. It wasn't the animal's fault. And then finally, exhaustion. How many days did you stay over working on this or other cases to your detriment, but because you want so much to move forward, the bigger mission of improved animal welfare in your community. And again,
I just wanted to do a quick time check for you because I know you want to get to some of the solutions. We've got about
yes,
10 minutes.
Thank you. The purpose here is these are shared, and it may not be the ideal actions that move our values forward, but even the smallest actions can be congruent. An animal not being alone, an animal being comforted, having a calm, euthanasia with their name said, gently pet. Community care, doing this together is something that helps us recognize our values and take even the tiniest actions together. It's kind of like somebody gave me the metaphor of lifting a couch, which if you ever tried to do by yourself, I don't recommend it. But when you have people together trying to uphold something, so much easier. And so what does it mean for the work? It's shared emotional load, many small supports instead of one heavy one. You don't have to be the be all end all for somebody. It's more about creating conditions where nobody has to feel like they have to do it alone. What it's not, these should be 3 separate bullets. It's not everyone processing everything. It's not constant emotional availability or ignoring your limits. So some of the key points here: consent means person gives permission, time limited, always connected to the values. So it's not just a vent session. Venting has a place, but it actually can worsen how you feel sometimes. And I'm trying to avoid that for you. When we connect it to our anchor values, that tends to not happen. And of course, distributed. In contrast, trauma dumping is one directional. There's not a containment to it, lots of details, graphic, and it leaves others often carrying sensory experiences of what traumatized you when they didn't consent. And sliming is a word. There's what's called the TEND Academy. It's based out of Canada. It's for first responders, including animal welfare workers, helping professionals. They have some free trainings, some pay, and they coined the terms trauma sliming, where you kind of give the person the graphic vision or details without warning, without consent, and no filtering, and it essentially leaves them carrying it too. And again, it often happens unintentionally when we ourselves are overwhelmed. It transfers the load. It doesn't necessarily have us feeling better, but now there's 2 of us. It's sometimes called contagion, workplace contagion. Emotions can be contagious. And again, it's not, wahaha, I'm gonna, have you feel like garbage too. It's 99% of the time, somebody's overwhelmed. And when we're in that spot, taking a deep belly breath, I call it a poo belly breath, push your belly out, hold. So out for 4, hold for 4, and then long exhale a couple times. Take a beat, pause for a moment, and be intentional. Give yourself grace. Like I said, almost all of us have slimed when we're stressed and fatigued. It can contribute. Raising awareness is the first step to shifting to another way. And Tend Academy has a framework called low impact debriefing that is going to be dropped in the chat for you. And the first step, this can be done with 2 people, it can be done in a group. I'll give you a slightly different for group, but it first is on our own awareness of impact. Like, oh my gosh, that sucked. That is so heavy. Like it's this, my brain is just swimming in this. I want to, just curl up and stop. Wherever you're at, like naming it. And that actually also name it. There's like a cheesy mental health saying, therapist use, you got to name it to tame it. But there's science backing it. And then if you name what's happening, it moves that to your thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead. And it helps activate that problem solver and get it out of, more of the primal limbic system. Fair warning, I'm really struggling with something and I need to talk. Is it okay if I share with you? So struggling with something hard, is it okay to share? Person can say yes or no. And remember, so can you. This is what we're trying to build, a community where everybody, nobody's setting themselves on fire. They say, I can't right now. I'm not in a great place myself, but let me check in with you later. And I'll also have some other resources that we can pull in outside of our peers. If they say yes, go to the salient points. That was such a hard euthanasia. I cared for that dog for, X amount of time, such a sweetheart. My heart is just breaking. And that doesn't have to go into any of the deeper details of what the animal went through, but it's more about the impact on you. Again, more on capacity check-in. Do you have space? If you're asked to listen, what do you need most right now? Sometimes people just want to listen. Sometimes they want suggestions. So finding that out can kind of let you off the hook too. It's often not about you fixing it. It's just hearing. So again, acknowledging the moment, naming the feeling, naming the value. We're here to save animals, and we did not save this pupper. An intentional close. What we did do is, this animal's life mattered. We gave this animal a safe, comforted end. This animal knew kindness. This animal knew love. We did that much. What we did matters for this animal. It's not the ideal. It's not what we wanted, but anchoring in that. And a community version, naming the moment. If it's a group, everybody goes around and says, a moment could be a headline. So if it's a headline on a blog, everybody gives their headline of what was hard, the feeling they have, one word, their shared value, and then again, closing with meaning. How did this matter? How did this still hold you? How are you all still holding true to your values? However imperfectly, you were there, you showed up, you did your best with, impossible odds. I don't know. Sometimes it's, hard to find. Listening is community care. It's not about absorbing, it's presence, not fixing. And again, you can ask, like, what would be most helpful right now? Like listening, or are you looking for some suggestions, or maybe that later? And think of yourself as part of a web versus a container. A web can hold a lot. A big old web net can lift that couch several stories. A container, not so much. Active listening, there are basic skills here, but again, it's about holding space. You can gently paraphrase back what you hear, ask open questions. These are things that can't be answered yes or no. Trauma informed, that's a whole other training, but Vancouver Humane Society has some wonderful free trainings. I didn't have that on the link list, but we'll get that out to you and on the discussion board. And remembering to close intentionally. I can be a rambler, so making sure I come back to, we're all here for a reason. And in some way, maybe so minute, it's you really have to like look for it. But how did what we do stay true to our whys and what we care about? And then if more is needed, I wouldn't say like, hey Janet, you really look a mess right now. I think you need to talk to somebody still, but ask permission. Like, Janet, I could see you're still really struggling, what do you think about us connecting, so you could have a bit more support. And that's real important, giving people choice and options. And this is an example, check-ins, naming the day, shared pauses. And you'll get the PDF of this, but this was a list from actually kind of a combination over multiple shelters, some way they did community care and the values. They weren't alone. They knew somebody cared. They didn't suffer at the end. And again, boundaries, what you can and can't give. I can listen briefly, but not much more. I care. Let's check in. Oof, these are peer support and community care are not a replacement for professional therapy. They're not professional debriefing. They are about building ongoing, sustainable ways to manage the very high stress levels you have. You've heard of microaggressions. There's also micro supports, a smile, just having a shared moment, like, meeting somebody's eyes and kind of, giving a little nod, like, yeah, this is hard. Like, I'm gonna, touch base with you later. These have that ripple effect, and can be as supportive as microaggressions can be damaging and painful. So the micro supports can help build that community care culture. The 10 toolkit, you'll have the link back to our why, remembering one small thing that has moved you in alignment. And often these are what you share with other people. This is a graphic to kind of walk yourself through. I won't read that to you. And then finally, the resources that can help. It's kind of like, okay, we're doing the community care, Janet, we need a bit more. 211 database, national, finds all sorts of resources for people, everything from eviction payment help to school supplies for kids, free health care, food, and it's searchable by zip code. You can call, chat, text. Pet Help Finder, run through Open Door, partnered with United Way, affordable vet care, pet food and supplies, crisis foster. If you're not on it, it's free to list, free to use. You can give these to folks. The University of Tennessee has a free veterinary social work helpline. It's work days, Eastern time. You can call and get some custom support for animal welfare work. And I went over, as I am sometimes inclined to do.
Well, no, but that was so great. And I wanted to have you get to all the solutions because I think, it is so many people struggling right now. And so we do have a question. Somebody who is a PhD student who needs to do 300 coaching hours and would like to give them to the sheltering community staff. Wonders where could she list herself so that others can find her? Is there a place where people could go find veterinary social workers, PhD social workers in general?
I would encourage you. The International Association for Veterinary Social Worker has a listserv. They have community cafes where they get together. So it's across the United States, Canada, North America. You don't have to be a social worker to join it necessarily if you're doing work that aligns with it. And many folks there connected with all sorts of, big shelters, little municipal animal control facilities. So it's International Association of Vet Social Work. I would definitely start there. Thank you so much for being willing to do that. That's fantastic.
And then one last question, because we are at a time and I want to give people a little bit more information at the end of where we're going to continue this conversation.
Yes.
But Could you talk a little bit about 988 and connecting if you're
Oh,
a leader and any of your staff or any of your clients or anybody is struggling, a little bit about that?
988 is 24 hour, 7 day a week number. You can call, you can chat, you can text. They typically will ask for your zip code, and that's for staffing purposes, so for their own end. But you don't have to give your name, and this will connect you with a mental health professional trained in crisis support. And it does not have to be suicide. Okay. It can be you're having a panic attack, you're overwhelmed, you're locked in the supply closet about, to hyperventilate, and you just need to talk to somebody safe for a moment, and your buddy's out on a cruelty call. And so I called them when I lost my mom to cancer earlier this year at the beginning of the year. And that's not something that can be fixed. And I knew that, but there were middles of the nights where I could not sleep and I was hurting, and I like to also check out things before I recommend them. And I can truly say they were great. It's truly not for, you don't have to be in a full-blown crisis, but they chatted with me until I fell asleep. I used it, I think, 3 different times, completely fine with being anonymous. I was very impressed. And you can put them on speaker. So let's say you have somebody that's, sobbing, talking about suicide. Of course, you can call 911, do whatever policies you have, but you can also put them on speaker. And now you have a crisis specialist. 988 automatically routes you to the crisis facility closest to your physical location. So they will put, and they 988 folks work very closely with 911. So if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm over my head with this community support, like if as long as I would put, in fact, I tell this to folks I supervise, interns, that put 988 and 211 in your cell phone. Like, you think you'll remember, but if you're stressed, you might not. And either of those, they're just invaluable. And 988, now you have a mental health crisis specialist right with you that can start talking with the person with you. Thank you so much, Aimee. That's
No,
yeah.
thank
Sometimes
you.
we need
This
more
was great, and I
resources.
feel like we need Janet longer. We need to do another one of these where she can
Oh,
delve more
I'd
into
love
this.
to. The work you
Uh,
all do is so hard and so important and needed for people and animals and communities. So, and anything I can do to contribute to the couch lift in, any way, I'm here.
Well, we will definitely be continuing this conversation over on Maddie's Pet Forum. So if you have any other, Allison just put the link in the chat. If you have any other questions, please go there. Janet will be answering them, and we'll be
Yes.
continuing our monthly conversation. So please always check out
Yeah.
on the Maddie's website so that you can see we're going to be doing more speakers again next year. So we are very excited to have you all. Thank you so much. And we'll see you in the new year.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.